This is the iPhone 11 and this is the iPhone XR, and these are undoubtedly the best valued iPhones you can get today. So the iPhone 11 and iPhone XR, they're both very interesting phones because this created a very different approach for Apple. When the XR came out, this was the third iPhone that they brought into their line. Previously, it was so I can get into all the specifics, but I think I'd rather not here. The short story is that this launched alongside the iPhone XS and XS Max, making this the entry-level iPhone at $750. At $750, it did cut a corner or two with the display and stuff, but it cut the corners in the right places, in my opinion, and it made it an excellent phone. The battery life was amazing, and I used this for 8 months this year, and it was an amazing phone. This is the iPhone 11. Now, this really took me by surprise, and I've probably said this 100 times, and I'll say it 100 times more. This was really a surprise for me. The launch, I didn't expect it to be cheaper. So Apple reduced the price of this by $50. So this is the direct successor of the XR. So the XR launched at $750, this launched at $700, and it had improvements over the XR. So any price drop in Apple's, there just hasn't been a price drop in Apple history, especially with phones. And just seeing this price drop was a shock in itself. And then further shock came along when they actually kept this phone alive side by side right below the 11 for $600. So this is an excellent deal as well. So this is $600, this is $700, and it's just both of these phones are incredible value. So the question here is, what is the difference between these two? What is that $100 worth it? Because this is $700, this is $600. If both of these are very similar phones and they're both great phones, should you spend that extra $100? And that's what I'm going to be looking at today. And I really thought going through this was going to be an easy answer. I would just say no, get the cheaper one. That's the best one. But while doing these tests, looking at the results, I think that it's just not that easy to make a decision here. And I'm going to try my best to give you guys a clear answer as to which one of these is the right move. So let me start off by talking about what's similar between these two phones. So they both have the same exact dimensions, same exact weight, same display on the front, same size notch. All that is very similar. So from the front, the phone looks identical. From the back, there are a few differences. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Now, the other key similarities here are that they both share the same cameras with their more higher-end brothers. This shares the same cameras as the XS. This shares the same as the iPhone 11 Pro. And in philosophy, these are very similar to each other. Now, where some of these differences are coming in are that the 11 has a slightly improved processor, which again, I don't think most people notice. I'll talk about that a little later. It has improved Face ID. It's 20% faster. It's not a big deal, but you will start to notice it. I only noticed it after I started using the 11 and I switched back to the 10R. I was like, oh, okay, I see. There's a few more. I mean, the 11 works with a little bit more extreme angles compared to the 10R, but again, not a big deal. And if you didn't really use both side by side, no way you'd be able to tell. Moving into what's different, and there's a few changes now that I can point out. Number one being that the back is a little bit different. Again, I'll talk about it in the physical differences. The other changes include the jump in processor. So this now has the A13 Bionic versus the A12 Bionic. This has 4 gigs of RAM compared to the 3 gigs of RAM. This has an improved camera on the back. It has night mode. It has a few more portrait modes, and it has a new front camera which is capable of 4K. Now 4K 60. The back cameras, both of them are supported 4K 60 all the way. The 10R did not have that, and the front camera on this is it's average. So front camera improvement, and it does have a much wider field of vision, which is a much requested feature, and I'm very happy that the iPhone finally has that. The iPhone 11 has a slightly better battery life. Apple doesn't say exactly how much, they just say 1 hour more, so that could mean anything, but it is an improvement as to what Apple says. Personally, I really didn't notice too much of a difference. It could just be the way I use my phone, but both the battery lives on these are excellent. No complaints whatsoever. For 95% of people, I think that this phone will last them a full day, no issues. Only the most extreme of extreme users will probably be able to kill this phone in less than a day. then one of the final small little changes is that this phone is rated for 2 meters underwater at 30 minutes, whereas this is rated for 1 meter underwater at 30 minutes. So again, both are waterproof, water resistant, in Apple's term resistant, but you really won't notice that much of a difference. But if you are planning on dunking your phone, I guess the 11 is just that little bit better. Another big change here is definitely that second camera addition. So you do have a wide angle lens on the back now. This is not a telephoto like previous iPhones with 2 cameras. This is a ultra wide angle lens. I love the ultra wide angle lens. It gives you so much more into the frame. It's come into handy so much. I really do like this feature. Some other different changes here with the camera are, again, it has night mode. It has more portrait mode effects. There's a better audio zoom. So it's the easiest way to describe it is that the audio will, as you zoom in on video, the audio will become more and more focused towards where you're zooming your camera. I've tested this. It's okay. I mean, I really don't know if I can tell a difference, but it's something that they do describe as being there. The cameras are amazing, especially video. They both cameras support 4K 60 FPS all the way, and they do support extended dynamic range now on the on 60 FPS as well. The previous iPhones, like the XR, they were limited up to 30 frames per second, but now we have full support up to 60 frames per second. And of course, you do have the Smart HDR, so it's called Smart HDR 2, I think. So there is a little bit more computational photography going on in the background, which gets you slightly better results. Comparing photos side by side with extreme dynamic conditions, I couldn't tell too much of a difference. I will show you some samples later on in the video. You guys can make your own decisions, but I think that camera-wise, they do a pretty good job. But the extra features that the 11 adds on are definitely something that are worth considering if you are into photography. And finally, one of the last key changes here is that the phone now has Dolby Atmos support. Dolby Atmos, I tried to find a way to differentiate it or show you guys on video. I just wasn't able to. There is a video that I saw that did a great job of showing you an example of it. I just wasn't able to recreate it myself. So what I'll do is I'll add a card or a link down in the description below. iPhone Do, I believe that's how he says it, iPhone Do. He made a video on this, very intuitive, very interesting. It shows the difference between Dolby Atmos surround versus not having it. I personally didn't notice any difference, so if you're an audiophile, you might notice. I didn't, so I feel like most people won't either. But again, if you guys see the trend here, nothing is a huge difference. Everything is just that tiny little step up. It's not something that's a big difference. But again, the price isn't a big difference either. It's like a tiny step up. It's $100 more, and it really becomes, the question does become, is that $100 really going to be worth it? And with that being wrapped up, let me move into some of the more specifics of this phone, starting off with the design. So at first glance, when you look at these two phones, they do look a bit different. You know, they don't look like they're just, you know, a very similar phone, but I assure you they are. So the two main changes here are that you have the second camera and a very redesigned camera bump here, whereas the XR, you know, has this very clean single lens look. I still really like this look. It looks really clean. It does have quite a protruding lens, but you know, it is what it is. The other really big change is that you have the Apple logo centered now on the 11 instead of it being on the top part of the XR. Honestly, I like both. I really don't mind it either way. This definitely has a more clean look to it. This has a little bit more of a branding. You know, I think that they both look really good. I don't mind them either way. Now, that's basically where the differences stop. Everything else is identical. So when I put them on top of each other and flip them to the side, you guys will get a better look at the buttons on the side, which are exactly the same. They line up exactly the same, and pretty much the exact same thing. When I put them side by side on the bottom as well, you guys can see exact same thing here as well. No difference. Size-wise, they both are the exact same height, width, length, weight. Literally nothing changed. It's impressive. Despite adding that second camera, the weight has remained the same. Same placement of the power button, same placement of the antenna band. So really, the only difference you have, physically speaking, is this extra camera lens down here and the relocation of the Apple logo. Of course, it doesn't say iPhone any longer on the bottom. It's got that little bit cleaner look, but pretty much the same. So up front, they are once again very similar. You guys really can't tell any difference because honestly, there isn't one. They use the same exact display, same exact size, notch, everything is same. In fact, you know, you can actually use the same screen protector you use on the 10R on the 11 because the front is unchanged and everything is the same. So physically speaking, these two are quite a lot more identical than you think they are. At first glance, they do look very different from the back, which I understand, you know, it's actually a very smart move in a way. It distances the 11 from the 10R, but they are very similar phones. So from the topic of the actual design, I want to talk about performance. So as I've mentioned before in the video, performance on both of these phones is absolutely excellent. But I just like to throw in the Geekbench, the benchmark numbers here. And I will warn you guys right off the bat, benchmark numbers really don't mean anything. They're just random numbers, but there's something that you can use as a comparison point from one to another. Don't put too much of your buying decision based off of this number or any benchmark for that example. Use the phone in person. If it feels good to you, if it's smooth, I assure you that's going to be fine. So that being said, the Geekbench score here is 1121 single core for the iPhone XR, 1331 single core for the iPhone 11. So the iPhone 11 is always going to be right on the right, by the way, guys, throughout the video. And the multi-core here is 2028 versus 3355. So the single core doesn't really have that much of a difference. It's about, I'd say, 15%. But the multi-core score here it's a pretty big leap. It's more than 50% faster. At least according to Geekbench. It's not faster in the sense, it's just it outperforms on multi-core a lot more. Now, what that really means is that when you're using multi-core applications, gaming, certain applications that require a lot of processing power, that's where the multi-core score will kick in. Single core is for most of the tasks the phone runs. Now, I'm no expert on this. I really don't know how the single core and multi-core work, but that's my basic understanding of it. So, really don't pay too much attention to the score per se. I've used both of these phones. I still use both of these phones on a day-to-day basis. Both of them feel very similar performance-wise, and I really don't think you're going to be seeing any true performance differences on either of these until they're a couple years old and they've had a few software updates, and then that's when the age will really start to show. For the next 2, maybe even 3 years, you really won't notice any differences between these two in terms of, you know, general application usage. There won't be any lag. That stuff usually Apple is really good about. So performance-wise, honestly, these are both a toss-up. Definitely, the 11 is going to be better. You know, it has the newer processor, all that. But the A12 to A13 isn't as big of a jump as, you know, marketing might make you think it is. It's definitely improved, but it's, you know, the A12 is nothing to sneeze at. So with that said, I'm going to go and give you guys a quick audio sample of both of these so you guys can listen to the 10R and the 11. Same song, I'm going to play a 15-second clip of it with a decibel meter so you guys can see how loud they get. Both of them sound very similar. I've listened to multiple songs on both through the speakers at full blast. I can't tell much of a difference. I've listened through the music app, through YouTube. Both of them seem pretty similar to me, and they're pretty equally stacked. So that's a good thing for both because they have excellent speakers. So now that we've looked at the physical design, performance, and the audio and everything, the last thing I do want to share is the photo camera samples of the phone. So I'll put up a few shots side by side. I'll put up a shot of, you know, just the normal field of vision you get from the 10R and then the ultra wide angle that you get from the 11. Just a few differences here and there. I'll include a few front camera samples, and I'll include a few video clips as well. And that should give you guys a decent idea of what the differences are. And at the end, I'll summarize everything for you, and I'll give you guys a final decision on which one of these I think you should buy. So let's start off by looking at the photo with what I think is the most difference, and that is the low light indoor photo. So on the left, the iPhone XR is just a normal photo. On the right, the iPhone 11 with night mode. And as you guys can see, while there isn't a drastic difference in brightness per se, I think that the biggest difference comes into the level of detail. So I want you to pay attention to two things. Number one is the stitching on my caddy. So you guys can just see there's so much more detail into that stitching that you can see on the iPhone 11 photo. And number two is look at the gold and silver colored Sharpies. You guys can clearly see that the iPhone 11, you can see the cap has Sharpie written on them compared to the iPhone XR where they just seem like a blurry mess, kind of look like they're not even there. You would miss it if you didn't pay really close attention. So not only does the iPhone 11 outperform the XR in night in terms of being brighter, but it holds a lot more detail as well. So night sight is an excellent tool if you're going to be taking low light photos. But I will give you a quick heads up here. This only works with the primary lens. It does not work on the ultra wide, and it does not work on the front camera. So night mode is limited to just one lens. Moving on, let's look at the front camera. So as I said in the last photo, there is no night mode on the front camera, but still there is a improvement, that's for sure. Now, the iPhone XR photo, the first thing you're going to notice is while it is dark, there isn't as much noise. So everything looks a little bit smoother, whereas the iPhone 11, it is brighter, but there's just a lot more noise. But while there is more noise, the colors are definitely way more accurate. So if you look at my t-shirt, it's more representative of the actual color it is. And if you look behind me at the poster of the Porsche on the wall, that red is actually what the color is. The one the iPhone 11 shows is really realistic. The iPhone XR, the color looks really faded out and washed out. The colors just look definitely better on the iPhone 11. Not to mention the iPhone 11 does have a larger angle field of vision, so there's just way more in the frame comparing to the XR. So while the front camera didn't take a massive leap up, I think that it does a decent enough job of an upgrade, but it is definitely still trailing behind some of its Android competitors. So moving on to these last bunch of photos. Now these photos are, there's about 4 photos here, and they all look incredibly similar. So these are taken outdoors in bright daylight, so lots of light, and the photo quality is almost identical, and that just goes to show how good the XR camera is on its own. It holds itself very well in daylight. I did even try to force some extreme dynamic range by pushing it right in front of sunlight, and the results honestly very similar. I don't see much of a difference. They both handle it very well. So if you're taking outdoor shots, if your primary photos are going to be outdoors in good lighting, the iPhone XR is really just as good as the iPhone 11. It's very hard for me to find any differences. The only differences that I can consistently find amongst the XR and 11 photos is that the iPhone 11 is slightly warmer in tune. That means it's a little bit more yellow. The whites look slightly more yellow than the iPhone XR, where the whites look a little bit bluer. So it's just photos are a little bit warmer on the iPhone 11. Now, again, that's all personal preference. Some people like it when it's cooler. Some people like it when it's warmer. But all that is very easily changeable. You can change that up in post-processing if you do want to. But quality-wise, dynamic range-wise, all these photos look extremely identical. And some of these photos, honestly, if you told me that they were taken from the same camera, I would believe you, because they honestly look like they've been taken from the same camera. So for the last photo comparison, I just want to show off this brand new ultra wide angle lens. So right now the photo you're looking at is right out of the iPhone XR. It's normal photo, nothing in. It is facing right into direct sunlight, so dynamic range is a little bit overworked there, especially at the top where it just looks like it's a bright yellow ball of fire. But otherwise, the photo looks pretty good. But in this photo, I just want you to focus on how much there is in this photo. So if you guys look closely, you see a couple of buildings. However, now look at the same photo out of the ultra-wide angle lens, which is 0.5 zoom on the iPhone 11 camera. And you guys can just see how much more detail is in there. So I took this photo from the same exact spot. I didn't move at all. both cameras in hand, and it just looks absolutely, crazy when you look at them side by side. I'm sorry I can't give you a better side-by-side look. Both of these photos were taken in landscape instead of portrait, so I can get a clear wide-angle shot here. But it's just crazy how much more detail the iPhone 11 is able to fit with that ultra-wide-angle lens. And this is one of the main reasons why I really do love the iPhone 11. It just looks absolutely wonderful with that ultra-wide-angle lens. Shots like this are just way more creative, and even with video, which I'll show you next, they just look really cool with that ultra-wide-angle lens. So wrapping this up, the ultra-wide-angle lens, really cool, and it's a great tool to have, especially if you like to get a lot into your frame. So moving on, let's look at some video. Alright guys, so these are the front cameras of the iPhone XR on the left and the iPhone 11 on the right, and as you guys can see right off the bat, the biggest difference is how much more that the iPhone 11 gets into the frame. The iPhone 11 is recording at 4K 60 FPS, that's the highest resolution it supports, whereas the XR is at 1080 at 60, that's the highest it supports on the front. But just the quality is a big step up, but the biggest difference I'm noticing here is the field of vision improvement. So let me know what you guys think about the front cameras. Alright guys, so this is the rear camera test of the iPhone 11 and the iPhone XR. 11 is on the right and the XR is on the left. So as you guys can see, quality wise they look quite similar. The one thing I do notice right off the bat is that the iPhone 11 is handling the sunlight a lot better. Up in the sky near the leaves, you guys can just see so much more detail. And that's of course because the iPhone XR now supports, the iPhone 11 now supports extended dynamic range on all recording modes, including 60 FPS, which the iPhone XR does not have. Both of these phones are recording at 4K 60 FPS. The audio is right from the phone, not touched at all. So what you're seeing is what you'll get exactly. So pretty smooth. Everything else looks great. Just the dynamic range is the biggest difference between the two. Alright, so we have one of the biggest differences of these two phones, and that is the ultra-wide-angle lens. So right on the right, as you can guess, you're looking at the iPhone 11. On the left, the XR. And just look at how much more you can get into frame with that ultra-wide-angle lens. Both of these are at 4K 60 FPS, but you guys can just see so much more in the frame on the iPhone 11. It makes things look a lot cooler. It gives it that GoPro-style effect, the wide field of vision. So just a cool little party piece, and if you do enjoy videography, I think this is a feature you guys will really enjoy. Alright guys, so this is the indoor test of the iPhone XR on the left and the iPhone 11 on the right. Both of them 4K 60 FPS, same resolution and everything else, so just let me know which one you think performs better in low light. Pretty much in low light they're becoming equal to each other from what I can tell, detail wise and everything. But with a lot of this video stuff, you really don't know until you have it in post and you can compare them side by side. So let me know what you think. Again, audio is all right from the mics. I haven't touched it at all. Alright guys, so this is the front camera test of the iPhone XR on the left and iPhone 11 on the right in low light conditions. Now, this isn't too low light. It's decent enough. This is what you'd probably expect to be on most rooms, a little bit on the darker side, but nothing too bad. But as you guys can see, iPhones just don't do that well of a job here. The iPhone 11, definitely a lot less noisier, but it is a lot less darker. The wider field of vision looks a lot nicer though, that's for sure. Otherwise, really, both of these are not the best cameras I would recommend. Front-facing wise, they need a lot of improvement, but let me know what you guys think about it down in the comments below. Man, it's been a long video with these two. These are, I swear, these are just so great, and making this video has become so much harder than I expected it to be. Initially, I was thinking, you know what, cheaper phone is better right off the bat. These are so similar, cheaper one's going to be better, but it's not that simple. It's a little bit more nuanced. The camera features that the 11 adds on, it could be really valuable for a lot of people. So it's not a tough decision here. So I talked about a lot of the similarities, differences, and all that. Now, when I summarize things, I think that the most important thing about the 11 is that it has a lot of updates on the camera sides of things. So if you are someone who enjoys photography, if you're someone who takes a lot of video, I think that the iPhone 11 is right off the bat the way to go. You know, just don't even look at the 10R, get the 11. Great set of cameras. Now, if you're someone who's more of a casual photographer, you don't really take a lot of photos, but you do take the occasional photos and videos, this does a great job on its own. You know, it's a great camera. I used it all throughout last year, and I would still use this in a pinch without any hesitation. Great cameras and great performance. So when I look at everything, when you stack everything up against each other, there's not a lot to differentiate them, but just the fact that this has this slightly newer processor, which means that, you know, down the road, you're going to get a little bit more performance, and then you get just that whole bunch of camera improvements. You get night mode, you get deep fusion, you get the Smart HDR2, just so many features that add up on the camera, and I think that the $100 that this costs is worth it for sure. So if you're in the market between these two, I'd say that the iPhone 11 is definitely what I'd recommend, but that's not as simple as I want it to be, because the 10R is a great phone on its own. So if you're in the market and you're going to be upgrading your phone again in a year or two, and you're not that into photography, the 10R does a great job. It has the same display, it has the same experience, and I think that you will be just as happy with this as you would be with this. So the decision comes down to how much you value camera. So if you do value camera, I'd say even a little bit. I think that the 11 might be worth looking at. If not, if you're going to be changing your phone out in a year or two, the 10R really will give you the exact experience that the 11 gives you. And that's about it. So with that conclusion, I mean, I just want to keep mumbling on and on about these two phones because of how great they are. And I just wish there was one clear answer here. Sadly, there's not. I'm leaning towards the iPhone 11 because of how good it is, but both of these phones are just excellent. That's it for this one, guys. If you have any questions or any specifics about these two phones, please feel free to ask. I love helping you guys out, answering questions like these. The last video, you know, one of my most popular videos is the iPhone 7 Plus versus 8 Plus, and people really seem to love the video. They have a lot of questions about phones that are very similar to each other, and I would love to answer those and help you guys out make a buying decision if you guys need that. And if you haven't already, I would really appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel if you're interested in tech, iPhones, all that general stuff. And if you would follow me on social media, I'll have all the links right here. And I just post a lot of behind the scenes and just some cool photos I take here and there. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, definitely check that out. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll catch you in the next one.